everyone, welcome back to my channel and my podcast. Today we are going to be discussing episode 2 of Lovecraft Country. This one aired, I think, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. This episode is called Whitey on the Moon, or Whitey's on the Moon, something like that. So I'm just do a little recap of the first episode. First episode, we got introduced to George, Atticus, and Letty, and then they were on their way to Arkham to find Atticus's father, Montrose. We got a little glimpse of what kind of world Lovecraft Country is. It's scientific, and there's a lot of monsters and just weird stuff happening in this show so far. That's basically what happened in the first episode. They made it to Arkham, and they made it to a mansion where people were expecting them. So before we get into episode 2, make sure you go watch the episode. It's called Whitey's on the Moon. Again, spoiler, we're gonna be talking about episode 2. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, so firstly, when we get introduced into this episode, they're all having a fun time in the mansion. Well, George and Letty are having a fun time. Like, George's room is full of books, his favorite books, so he's just running around looking at his books. Letty's room is full of clothes that are in her exact size, which is kind of, you know, they didn't know they were coming. How did they know what size they had, and how did they know what George's favorite books were? So it's off the bat kind of weird, and then Atticus knows it's weird because he's just sitting there like, what's going on? Like, you know, why do these people need me, blah, blah, blah. They go to have a meeting with the guy that opened the door for them, and they are going to have some breakfast, and Atticus starts talking about like the monsters, like how you guys can be fine when that just happened to us last night. And George and Letty have no idea what he's talking about. They're just like, what are you talking about? I don't know what happened last night, but they just said, I just remember waking up here. So they have no idea what happened. And he's like, no, I can like prove it. Let me go show you this car, because the car got all crashed and everything. And they go into the garage and the car is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with the car or nothing. And all of a sudden the guy at the door like pops up out of nowhere. And they're just like, whoa, what in the world? So George or Atticus is like, I know what's like, something's going on. There's no way like I made all that stuff up, like I know that happened. So he's trying to like convince George and Letty like, no, this happened, like I'm not lying. And they're just like, dude, you're crazy. They are in this town, or in this mansion, trying to figure out what's going on. And then they go into the local town that's like nearby, and they see like this giant tall pillar that has stone on it, and they're like, well, if there's any place, like that's probably where Montrose is gonna be, because that's the only stone like building in this entire town, and if that's a jail, you would want it to be stone so they can't just get out. So they find like the person who like is in charge of that area, and they asked her if she was a sheriff, because like she's kind of in charge of it, and that's the only stone building in town. And she's like off put by them, and basically calling them animals and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, well, we're guests of, I forgot his name, but we're guests of the guy like that who lives in the mansion. She's like, you guys don't look like the type, and all this kind of stuff. So they just like left, and they're like, yeah, this is probably where Montrose is being held, because it's the only stone building in town, like I said. So they went back inside, and they were separated. They had Atticus go meet with the woman that saved them from the first episode, her father, and I forgot his name. I literally can't remember it. If I remember, on my YouTube channel, I'll put like a little thing on there, but it's kind of like the main dude of this town. He owns the like mansion and stuff like that. So he goes to meet with him, and like he's in the laboratory getting something cut out of his body. He's just in there screaming, and someone's just cutting something out of his body. And then like all nonchalant, just like gets it tied up, and he's fine. So it's just weird. I don't know what's going on. They were telling Atticus that he has the blood of one of the members, Titus. He was like the founding member of this group, the Sons of Adam. So like Adam and Eve. And he has like the blood of Titus. So like they need him for the spell they're trying to do. So we find out that these people are wizards. So like I said, this show was so weird. I was not expecting that, but they're wizards. Atticus is like the soul carrier of Titus, who created this, you know, group of people with wizardry and stuff like that. So basically what this woman's father is trying to do is open the garden to Eden so he can have immortality, because of course, what do people want in life? Money, immortality, and power. So He's trying to open the garden to Eden so he can get immortality and live forever and have all the power, blah, 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 blah. So like he's just talking about Atticus, but all the things that they need to do in order for the ritual to happen, all this kind of stuff. Wizard lady like separates them into different rooms. In each room like something different is happening because all the guests were arriving. So in Letty's room, Atticus came in, but it's not Atticus. He came in and was like pretending to be Atticus. I have no idea what the person was. Like, I don't know if it was just a figure that they made. I don't know if it was an actual person. I'm not really sure how they did that, but it was Atticus's body and Atticus's face and his voice and everything like that. So she was like telling him about her, you know, life as a child and how her mom was like never home and she was scared and all this kind of stuff. And then in George's room, he was visited by his brother's wife. So that was kind of awkward because they were dancing together and like he was telling her he loved her. So we kind of got a glimpse that his brother, or George, is messing around with his brother's wife, which is kind of sad, but that's what happened. And then in Atticus's room, the lady from the first episode that was covered in red, she's from Korea. And in the first episode I forgot to mention, but like he called someone in Korea, and I'm pretty sure this is his lady. But like she came out of the wardrobe like in war scene and was like trying to kill him and all this stuff. And then Letty, and back in her room, found out that it was not Atticus because he was kind of pushing it too far. And then when he was taking off his pants, a snake came out, kind of like Adam. So she was like, "You are not the guy." And then in George's room, he was like, "You're not real. Like, you died. No, it's not you." And then in Atticus's room, he killed the girl. So they were all like going through something. And then like it showed them looking into the mirror. You just saw what was happening in the room. All of the like members of the group were sitting there drinking and laughing at them. I don't know if it was some sort of entertainment for the group to just watch them, because again, even though they are like a part of the same group in a way, like they're not like equals at all. George ended up finding like a secret library with like tons of books in it, and he came across a book that would be perfect for later on in the episode, because when they had their like meeting about the sons of Adam, like all the guys in the group, George stood up and was talking to everybody, basically saying that Atticus basically in charge of all of you guys. And Atticus was like basically saying, "You guys need to tell me where my father is, or everybody get out except for this main dude," the main guy that was like the main wizard, and basically like commanded him to tell him where his father was and all this stuff. So he ended up telling where his father was. It ended up being in that stone jail, like I said. And so like when they went down there, someone dug a hole out, and then we go to the outside, and Montrose was like reaching out like he escaped his prison, like he crawled himself out of there. And then George, Letty, and Atticus are sitting there waiting for him. They're like, you know, like, "Hey dad, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I don't need your guys' help, like I would have rescued myself," and all this stuff. And he's told him, "I sent you that letter out of pity, like I didn't mean it, whatever." So they get in the car and they're ready to go, like they're ready to get out of this town, like it's this weird stuff going on. And then right before they cross over, some more wizardry stuff happens, and the car smashes into an invisible shield, and like they all get hurt and they all get out of the car. And then the guy, the main wizard, and his daughter come over, and he shoots Letty and kills Letty. Letty actually died. And then he told Atticus to choose between his dad, Montrose, or his uncle, George, which one would die. And he, I think, just looked at George out of instinct, not just because he wanted him to die, but I think he was just looking over at him. And so that father shot and killed him, or just shot him at least for now. We're taken to Atticus naked in a room getting sponged down for this ritual for the sons of Adam. And the lady went in there, the wizard lady, and he was basically telling her like, you know, this group is called the Sons of Adam, like no matter how hard you work, you're a woman still, blah blah blah. And she's like, "Yeah, I understand that, and you know, just because you haven't done anything, just because you shared the blood, like you got into this group for free basically." So I think in a way she was jealous of Atticus because she worked so hard to be a part of the group, but she would never do it or never be in it because she was a woman. Like she wasn't even allowed in that one group that they had this huge meeting with. Like there was no women in there, so it's definitely like a male oriented like kind of society. They get into the room ready to perform this ritual. Atticus is in front of like this portal looking door, and then all of a sudden, like once they started getting settled and the blood was coming out of Atticus, like these flowers were blooming, and it was like beautiful. Like his blood was showing all this beautiful stuff. And while they're doing this ritual, Whitey's on the Moon, the poem, was voicing over. So it's just basically talking that poem about like, well, you know, white people are on the moon, but my people are struggling at home. Well, white people are on the moon, but my people are doing this, blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of like comparing how people were so about people being on the moon versus people in their own country were like being killed or not having the same opportunities. So it was definitely really cool to see that poem over the scene, because this dude, this white guy, was basically using Atticus and his blood to like for his purpose. So without Atticus, he would not be able to do that. So it's basically showing like, well, without black people, there's some things in this life that would not have happened. So it was definitely cool to see all these different scenes come together like that. So they basically got the portal open, and then Atticus sees this woman who was mentioned before. I don't want to mention her before because I want to mention her now. Hannah, who was a slave of Titus, because Titus is very known to be very good with his slaves, and Hannah was actually pregnant with Titus's son or daughter or something. I don't really know who they said. Hannah's magic or something was interrupting the spell from Atticus's ring. Like black smoke came all over him and basically shut down the ritual. It actually killed the wizard, like main wizard guy, and the other people in the room. It turned them to stone and they just like dissipated into ash. So he followed her through like the door and let him out of the house, because they mentioned before that the house burned down with a fire. They had to rebuild this house, but Hannah was the one that started this fire, and she showed him how to get out the door. So this entire mansion collapses. He goes outside and sees that Leigh's alive, because earlier the lady brought her back to life basically. So she's alive, and he was just like looking at her, and she just looks very sad. So they went out to the car, and George actually died. He succumbed to his wounds because they healed Letty, but they said they weren't going to heal George until the ritual was completed. Well, that didn't happen because they all died. So George died in his brother's arms, and before that, he was dying on the bed. He basically told his brother that you need to be better to Tik, blah, 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 and he's like, don't tell me what I need to do with my son. And George told him, well, he may not be yours. So we got the confirmation that George was messing around with Montrose's wife, and that Tik may be George's son or maybe Montrose's son. So we don't know whose son is who, but it's a possibility. So my takeaway from this episode, like I said, my favorite part was probably the poem over that scene, because it just made everything come together. Like without Tik, this wouldn't have happened, but without black people, certain situations, that other stuff wouldn't have happened. So it was definitely, I liked that scene a lot. It was cool to have you hearing that stuff and then seeing it visually. My questions will have to do with like the ritual. So I don't know if Hannah was really the reason why it didn't work, or if there was something else, like why it didn't work, like maybe because he was mixed with Titus and her blood, that it like counteracted each other. So was Hannah a wizard as well? Like did Titus teach her wizardry, or did she learn on herself? Like I just wanted to know like how, or like why it didn't work. But honestly, after watching the second episode, I thought this show was over. I didn't realize like there was gonna be more to it. I thought they were gonna be at this place for like a long time, but they were done in the second episode. So I'm like, what's gonna happen in the next episode? Like what else can they do? So for episode 3, we have a little glimpse about, it looks like an exorcism. So that's basically all I got from the little preview. So we're gonna see what happens in episode 3 of Lovecraft Country. If you have any questions, or if there's anything that I missed, because I just wrote down the stuff that was like more important to me on the show, make sure you leave it down in the comments. I want to know like what you guys thought about this show, and make sure you guys watch it, and I will see you guys in my next episode. Bye.